In this video, I'm going to be doing a teardown of a Sony Vaio C2GPS. I'll be replacing the hard drive with a compact flash-based SSD solution. In the end, I'll be showing off the unique front light system under different lighting conditions. I'll also be disassembling the screen and the front light unit to get a look at how this system works internally. But first, some quick history and specs. It's based on a second generation Picturebook, and really its specs are identical to the C1 XE, even though the motherboard looks the same, with the major difference being the screen. Now about that screen, it's an 8.9 inch ultra wide XGA 1024 by 480 screen, but what makes it unique is that it uses a reflective polysilicon TFT panel. Rather than using a traditional backlight where light shine from behind the panel, this panel uses ambient light to illuminate the display. This makes it work a lot better in bright conditions like outside and direct sunlight, where this GPS focused model may see a lot of use. To work better when there isn't a lot of ambient light, included the front light unit. This clips onto the screen with a piece of glass that flips over the top and lights it from above. Because of this, it lost the webcam embedded into the top of the screen, which is probably why it doesn't use the Picturebook name. For the other specs, it features an Intel Pentium 2 266 MHz. Sony moved to Transmeta CPUs in their 3rd and 4th generation Picturebooks. It has a Neomagic Magic Media 256AV video chipset, 64 MB of RAM, upgradable to 128 MB with proprietary memory modules. It came with an 8 GB 2.5 inch IDE hard drive, and came with Windows 98 2nd Edition installed. And finally, it came bundled with a Sony Handy GPS unit. So overall, this is a pretty rare unit today. With its unique screen, it didn't seem to sell very well. Released exclusively in Japan, it said that less than 5,000 units were ever produced. And now let's take a look at the C2. Along the left, we have our iLink FireWire port, PC card slot, exhaust. On the back, we have our battery. And on the right side, we have our jog dial, mini VGA TV out, our proprietary DC in jack, USB, microphone, headphone, and infrared port. On the bottom, we have our door for our proprietary memory module. Opening it up, we have our mouse buttons, track point. You notice no webcam at the top of the screen like all other C1 Picturebooks. That's because it uses the detachable front light, which is clipped on to the top and the bottom. You can pop it off. You can see 5 spring-loaded pins along the bottom, and these made up with the 5 pads on the back of the screen. So reattaching the screen, we have 2 tabs at the top of the front light that sit in the recesses on the screen, and there are some smaller clips that clip along the bottom edge. To remove the glass cover, we have these 2 tabs on the side. You'll hold against one and press against the other to pop open the back cover. Here's the cover resting on the table. You do need to tilt the screen back, otherwise it'll just hang in the air. And now we can flip the front glass over the screen. It'll be held on with the same clips that would normally hold the screen down to the laptop base. Up top we have a switch to turn the light on and off. I'll show this light in action at the end of the video. So you can flip the back cover back into place, and you basically have a more standard laptop just with a really thick screen. Here's a good side view with the cover open. They do show this pose in some of the marketing material, maybe just to show off the mechanism. Not sure if you'd really use it like this, over leaving the cover closed. Take a quick look at some of the accessories, starting with the power adapter. It's a normal 16-volt adapter, but it's got a proprietary end on it. My first gen Picturebook had a normal barrel jack, and the only other Vaio I've seen with this connector is the N505 series. Might have been the trend at the time. I know some Toshiba librettos around the same time went to a proprietary connector before going back to a barrel jack. We have our display dongle with TV out, VGA, Next, we have our bundled GPS unit. It's battery powered. We have an optional mounting bracket that clips on the bottom, and we use a thumb screw. And it gives us a Velcro pad to stick it to something. Along the bottom, we have a proprietary USB port. It's kind of common for USB players and cameras at the time. Looks kind of like a printer port, but smaller. So to hold it to the screen, we have this spring-loaded clip along the top. I do find it interesting that on the C2 with the front light installed, this is where it excels in outdoor lighting, where you may be using the GPS. It doesn't fit under the screen. Here I have another C2 without the front light installed. This clips on just fine, and this is how you see it in all the marketing materials. So let's get started with the teardown, first by removing the front light and then the battery. Next, under this door, we have the proprietary memory module. This is the same form factor as other Gen 2 C1 Picturebooks. It is different than the first generation. So we have 5 screws to remove. They're all marked with arrows, and they're all the same size. Next, we need to remove the plastic caps covering the hinges. These are held on by 3 clips. Do this with a plastic spudger, a little gentle prying. I found that putting the laptop into this tent configuration gives you the best access to all the clips. So after removing the 2 covers, we reveal 2 screws holding the top cover on. The one on the left is longer. We access the one on the right from underneath, and it's shorter. Next, we remove the keyboard by prying up at the bottom, then tilting it forward, being careful because we have a couple ribbon cables. Now we can disconnect the trackpad and keyboard cables. We need to lift up on these clips to release tension on the cables. Next, we have 3 screws holding the top cover on. One is under this warranty void sticker, which looks like it's already been peeled up at some point on mine. Next, we need to remove the remaining 2 ribbon cables for our mouse buttons and our LED status lights and power button. Next, we release the clips at the front of the laptop, and then we can lift the top cover off. So we can see our hard drive, but it's being covered by this ribbon cable running over to the I/O board on the right. I'm going to release the clip on one side. Now we can remove the hard drive. We have 3 screws holding on the brackets. Now the cable for the phone jack is running right over the top of this screw. So to give me a little bit of slack, I just pop off the motor module off the motherboard. And I can move the wire out of the way. So next up, I'm loosening up the IDE cable from the hard drive. This will make it easier in a moment. So a tip, I recommend unplugging the power cable from this connector here because the bracket kind of gets caught under it. Did this on my second C2, it just makes it a little easier. So let's take a close-up look at the board. Next, I'm removing the CMOS battery. Now this is a lithium battery, so I don't really need to worry about it leaking and doing damage. Mine wasn't working though, so I'll just leave it out. So here's my 44-pin, 2.5-inch compact flash to IDE adapter, 4 GB industrial card. I'm going to install this without a caddy just to give it a little bit easier access if I ever need to swap this out. Now this is going to be sitting right on top of the ID cable, so you definitely want to trim off the long jumper pins poking out the back here. And then I'm going to use some double-sided tape, leaving the paper on the back, so I'm just using this more as a spacer and to protect the cable. So reassembly begins, and we start by reconnecting the ribbon cable for the I/O board. Next, popping the modem back onto the connector on the motherboard, then rerouting its cable, making sure we reconnect the power cable if we had unplugged it here. Reinstalling the top cover, it has 3 screws. Reconnecting the 2 ribbon cables for the mouse buttons, LEDs, power button. Next, reinstalling the keyboard. We insert the keyboard into the slots on the top and then lay it flat. We reinstall our screws underneath our hinge covers, the longer one on the left and the smaller one from underneath on the right. We have our 5 case screws. And finally, we pop on our 2 plastic hinge covers, and the reassembly is complete. So now I'm going to be opening up the screen, starting by removing the 2 display cables on the left and then 1 screw on the right. Now the reason I'm doing this is a pretty unique LCD with its front light. There's interest on the Vaio Library Discord as to what the part number and manufacturer of this panel was, since this is a pretty rare unit that hadn't really been documented. I was more recording this as just a reference and then planning to take pictures, but then I figured I might as well just include this. I'll have a link to a Google Drive with those close-up images. So we have 4 screws, 2 different sizes and colors underneath the rubber feet. We need to remove another set of hinge covers. These are held on the same as the previous ones removed with a bunch of clips. These were a bit hard to remove. I'll just show the right side here. Left side's the same. Ran into some issues with that side since the plastic was cracked and it was harder to pry against. So now just use the plastic spudger to release the clips all around the perimeter. We have 4 screws holding the panel in. Taking a look at the back of the panel, and again I'll have close-ups of all the circuit boards, the part numbers on my Google Drive. And we'll skip the reassembly of the screen. And in the same spirit, I thought I would take apart my front light unit here, since it hasn't ever really been documented. Not expecting too much since it's basically just some LEDs. Possibly getting some insight on the connector, the spring contacts. Mine were a little beat up, but they still worked. We have 4 screws along the bottom. 2 of them are hidden under the rubber pads. Removing the top cover to make this a little easier. We have 2 more screws. So we have some clips on the bottom, but it's mainly being held together by the 5 vertical clips. So as expected, not too much in here. I'll get some close-ups and then spare you the reassembly. Since there isn't factory recovery media for the C2, mine here is just running an image from a first gen C1. Since this is just a Gen 2 picture book with a really unique screen, I thought I'd focus on showing how that screen works under different conditions. So what you're seeing now is the C2 in a well-lit room on an overcast day without the front light in place. So you can see it is usable, but it's pretty dark. Now let's put the front light in place and switch it on. Obviously, we got a huge improvement here. Next, trying it out with only room lighting and no natural light. And since this is a C2 GPS, I feel like I at least have to open up a navigation app. And the final test, trying it out in complete darkness. But that's it. Thanks for watching.